Hi, my name is Jennifer Parker, and I am a long-term seasoned faculty educator in higher education, and also I'm an instructional designer. I'd like to talk today about this topic of using AI technology, artificial intelligence, and other emerging technologies, and how we can provide supportive learning experiences that really maximize authentic and meaningful learning and doesn't bypass that learning while supporting academic integrity. So one of the challenges that we have is that we might consider that students just jump to the results when they're using ChatGPT. They actually bypass the scaffolding and those small learning benchmarks when we're just cutting and pasting or when we're just looking for the end result instead of the learning pathways. So I'd like to use an analogy, which is using a dictionary. Imagine that you're learning a language or you're learning a new vocabulary word that you're unfamiliar with. So you could just type it into a search engine and get an instant definition, or you could go through a physical dictionary, while the online method is of course quicker. Using a dictionary involves deeper engagement with the language because you're actually practicing multiple skills when using a physical dictionary, like understanding alphabetical order, recognizing spelling patterns, and actively engaging with the dictionary to learn the new word. And the process of using a dictionary not only gives you the word's meaning, but it enhances your understanding of the language structure. So I'm using this analogy because I want to talk about what those processes are in place and what is missing if you jump to the results. So that's why I wanted to talk to you about the formative practice. When we're introducing this foundation of formative practice, we're leveraging not just technology. We want to leverage scaffolding and learning benchmarks and learning pathways and make it a supportive, engaging experience. So the first topic is, what does formative practice and formative learning look like in your classroom? The first strategy will be using early student diagnostics. The purpose of using diagnostics is to have the instructor use the diagnostics as a tool so that we can really get to know our students, their organic level when they first enter your classroom, so that you can use this to be able to cross-reference their progress and to better measure where they are in that learning process. And if you do think they might actually be cheating, you can also use this as a tool to refer to when you meet with your students and when you are tracking their progress and being able to better measure who they were in the beginning of your class and who they're becoming as they go throughout your class, your learning activities and assessments. When we talk about scaffolding, it's a larger process that I've tried to really kind of make more condensed. So we first start off with activating any prior knowledge, getting to know your students through those diagnostics, getting to know them through those warm-ups, those initial meetings, taking polls and surveys, knowing who they are through their cultural capital that they bring to the classroom. And then after you've gotten to know a little bit more about your learners, you can set those student learning goals and then break them down into learning benchmarks through the use of nano learning. And all the while you'll be reviewing and increasing complexity, and hopefully that will lead to more learner independence. The next point is nano learning. Nano learning supports student learning by using technology, emphasizing formative learning, but breaking down, reducing the media content into smaller, meaningful chunks. In other words, it's not just getting the paper at the end of the assignment because they use ChatGPT, but because you were able to guide them through those learning benchmarks and you're able to break down that media content, which will make those learning pathways stronger, and it will enable the students to demonstrate their learning more clearly. Through that scaffolding process, we have a little bit of a step-by-step process, but essentially after we determine who the students are and activate their prior knowledge. We set those learning goals, and now we're going to determine what those instructional pathways are, what types of lessons and assessments we're going to use to be able to start the feedback loop, which will increase student confidence and increase students' independence. All the while, we are going to be reviewing back to those earlier content and skills that they're learning and leaning on those earlier skills as we build throughout the complexity and develop higher levels as they progress through your course. Another point to consider is chunking out that learning content and to take those main learning objectives and break them down into smaller subtopics. Again, revealing your students' ability and guiding them through that learning process. In the spirit of universal design for learning, we want to be able to give your students multiple opportunities to demonstrate their learning, and that will be through multiple modalities, multiple opportunities through low-stake assessments that focus on their abilities rather than those higher stakes exams, which will also reduce any potential bias that could come up when we have multiple opportunities to demonstrate this instead of giving a higher proportion on final exams, for example. We want to be able to even out the amount of grade weight that you put in your grading scale through those formative practices. Another benefit to using technology is the potential of using adaptive learning. Before all this technology came out, it became a lot of time-consuming work for the instructors to utilize adaptive learning through learner-based methods. But now that we can use technology, we're able to use adaptive learning platforms and apps. For example, Duolingo, that's a language learning app that will adjust to the students' responses. And that another example is McGraw-Hill Publishers. They have their own learning management system which adjusts the content and skills according to how they're performing throughout the content. Another great tactic is collaborative interactive simulations, and this will increase meaningful learning and decrease the temptation to cheat because we're actually using active applied learning in the classroom and simulating any potential skills and content that will be useful in their future life once they leave your course, and they should be able to use those learning outcomes leaning on some of these simulated activities. And the last part I want to talk about is academic integrity. So these are some strategies that we can use. And firstly, we should just define what is cheating. In this day and age with new technology, we should be able to determine, really re-examine, what does cheating mean to you and what is it for the student? How is it defined in your curriculum, in your department? How is the policy defined within your learning institution? How is it defined in your syllabus? And make it really clear what those boundaries are for your learners so it is actually supporting their learning. Designing authentic assessments, again, which will be active, will be applied learning, and will be connected to those learning outcomes, which are actionable and measurable. A good point to make is, how do they cite their sources? If they're using ChatGPT and ChatGPT is scanning all of those websites, we'd like to know where they got their content and maybe talk to them a little bit about it through oral examinations, through interviews, through debates, discussions, office hours, and whatnot. And those types of activities will allow them to really bring it to life when you get to your face-to-face point if you're teaching a hybrid course or maybe a face-to-face course. There are plenty of plagiarism detection tools, and some of them work really well and some of them have mixed feedback. So that could be something to consider. And again, those frequent low-stake assessments, using collaborative work, customizing your assessments through adaptive learning, and making sure that you have secure assessment environments. So that could be something where they You have the option of checking in their exams, shuffling or randomizing the questions, randomizing the answers, giving them different types of test banks. And so all of these strategies I hope you have found useful. And I look forward to hearing from you. If you would like to contact me at jenniferparkerdesigner@gmail.com or find me on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.